My name is Gina Welch. I've been coming to River for almost 4 years. I grew up in the church in Cutbank, Montana, and it was an Assembly of God church. And I sang in church starting from when I was 4 years old. And I always won all the Bible memorization contests, and that was my family there. It was a good place to be for the most part. I went to Glacier Bible Camp every summer. So that was my childhood. As I got older, my parents, their marriage was falling apart. We ended up, my mom and I moved to Missoula when my parents got divorced. And we came to Missoula and we had absolutely nothing. We lived in a tent. And so my first real taste of poverty at that time. And then the first summer that I came back to visit my dad, he had some guys, some kind of distant relatives of his staying at his house, and they were inappropriate with me. They were just gross, like groping comments that they would make. And I decided to tell my dad that this was happening. And he got really shaky and angry. And for a split second, I thought it was going to be the proper amount of outrage that this was happening. And he was angry at me for saying these things about his friends. And that is when I lost faith in my earthly father. And I had a hard time not translating that to God in some way. And fast forward to when I was 14, I met this guy outside school, and he was super flattering and asked if he could give me a ride home. And I was totally naive and very flattered. And I said yes, and he drove me super far up into the mountains where I could not get away from him, and he raped me. Burned me with a cigarette, and I came home from that and didn't tell anybody because I thought it was my fault. After that happened, I became fully bulimic very quickly, and I became addicted to that behavior. I still managed to get a fair amount of things done. Yeah, I did really well in school. I got my degree in nursing. And for a while there, it almost looked like things were going to look up for a little bit because I had met the man that was my first husband. We were living in Minnesota, and I had a little church that I was going to that I really liked. And then we had our first son, and he had a cleft lip and palate. When that was found on the ultrasound, they actually asked me if I wanted to abort him, and I was like, no. However, it was really rough. It was rough for a long time. He was in pain all the time. He had surgeries. And I really started to get, slide back into this depression and some of my old behaviors. And looking at my little baby boy and that much pain and suffering, it really had me start to question God. When I look back on it now, I think that at the time that felt less painful to me to believe that God just wasn't there than that he didn't care about me, that he didn't care about my depression, that he didn't care about my bulimia, my alcohol use, my pain, my son's pain. And so I became a full-blown, very active atheist, and remained so for a long time, about 10 years. I actually was one of the co-founders of Missoula Area Secular Society, which is a secular group in Missoula that still is active to this day. Obviously, I am associated with them in no way anymore. Things only went downhill in my life in that time. depression, full force. Eating disorder, full force. Alcohol. And I destroyed my marriage with my selfishness, my lack of respect for my marriage, my lack of integrity. I take ownership of that. And then a time happened that I refer to as the worst 3 years of my life. In the space of 3 years, my stepfather died, my father died, my mother died, I got divorced, and then I was into a relationship with my now husband, which at the beginning was not a good thing. I was an atheist. He had his own reasons for being mad at God. He was mad at God enough that he didn't care that I was an atheist. So we were both horribly, horribly hurt people trying to bandage ourselves with the other one. Purposefully, actually, we got pregnant with Thea, as many of you know, sweet Thea. And while I was pregnant with her, some things happened that made me not want to be in that relationship anymore, and actually put me in the spot where I didn't want Thea at that time. But where that put me was in the deepest depression I've ever experienced. So there was many a sleepless night where I would just lay there and think about that I just wanted to die. I was done. But the thing that saved me from that is that I wouldn't do that to my kids. I vowed to myself, I wouldn't. I had 2 sons, and I couldn't bear to think of letting them have a mom who killed herself. So, and I couldn't do that to the baby that I was carrying. And so I felt like I was completely trapped. I couldn't even get out of the situation I was in. And I was laying there in bed one night, just lamenting that I was so trapped, so miserable, so done with my life. And I heard the softest, most gentle voice. And it said, "I'm still here." And in my prideful place I was in, my knee-jerk reaction to that was, no, you're not. You're like I've decided that you're not here. But that was the turning point. And it didn't happen all at once. I kind of slowly started to think about God again. I got my Bible out, that even though I, for 10 years was like, I don't believe in God, I still couldn't throw it away. I still had it. And every step that I took back in the direction of following God was rewarded with a little bit of lift of depression, a little bit of lift of some of the hopelessness that I was feeling. And eventually I got to a point where I wasn't just walking on a path back to God, I was running. And I live right behind the church, for those of you that don't know. And I had a day where I was like, well, I live right next to a church. It couldn't be that easy, could it? And so I came to River. And right away, as soon as I walked through these doors, it felt different. And I was like, yeah, I like it here. I snuck in and out of church and didn't talk to anybody for the first year that I came here. I would sit and listen to the sermon and sob the whole time, and then I would leave. But then I started getting more involved. I signed up to be a greeter, and then I started doing worship, and then I started volunteering at Clothing Closet every week. And every step of more involvement that I've had here has had, none of it's ever been a mistake. I've always been glad that I've done every one of them. And River's been just so instrumental in deepening my relationship with God. And my turning back to the Lord also brought my husband back. We have now, and for several years now, have had God in the middle of our relationship, and it is by far the best it's ever been. And I'm certain that we would not have stayed together if that had not happened. So every day, I am so grateful. I am, for the first time in my adult life, free of depression, free of eating disorder, free of addiction to alcohol, free of self-hatred. And I am so thankful every day that even though I spent so long actively denying God, He was there the whole time. And all I needed to do was be willing to reach out and meet Him. And when I did that, He was there. He saved me. And I'm so grateful. So if you're feeling lost in that way, I guarantee you, God loves you. He is there. If you're just willing to reach out your hand.